Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something you almost never see, but it's the invisible system that every single successful company relies on. It's the framework that makes sure the numbers you see and the reports you read are actually, trustworthy. We're talking about internal controls. But let's be real for a second. When you see a company reporting huge profits or massive assets, how do you really know any of that is true? What's stopping someone in a back office from just making it all up? It's a fundamental question of trust, and the answer is definitely not just good intentions. Well, the answer is something called an internal control system. The easiest way to think about it is like a company's internal rulebook. It's the set of policies and procedures for handling everything from cash to data to day-to-day operations. It's designed to stop mistakes before they happen, catch fraud, and just make sure the business is running the way it's supposed to, and legally. Okay, but what happens when that rulebook has a huge hole in it? What happens when the system starts to crack? Well, that's where the first line of defense comes in, the auditors, and they've got a very specific way of sounding the alarm. So if an auditor is digging around and finds a serious weakness in a company's controls, they don't just pull the CEO aside for quiet chat. Nope, they are required to issue a formal, official warning. It's called a management letter, and it goes straight to the people in charge. And this isn't just some friendly suggestion, There are international auditing standards for this, specifically ISA 315, that lay out a really clear process. First, the auditors have to identify what they call material weaknesses. Next, they've got to communicate those findings directly to the top brass, management and the board. And finally, they have to put it all down in writing. It creates an official paper trail, a crucial piece of the accountability puzzle. All right, but here's where things get interesting. An internal control system isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Not even close. The way a massive global corporation handles this stuff looks nothing like how a small family-owned business does it. So how does that work? For the big guys, everything is super formalized. We're talking written codes of conduct, structured risk assessments, and something called high segregation of duties, which is just a fancy way of saying the person who approves a payment can't be the same person who actually makes it. But then you look at the smaller companies and it's a whole different world. The code of conduct might just be a verbal understanding, and risk is often handled on the fly. So your first thought might be, whoa, that small business sounds way riskier, right? And that's the challenge for sure. Limited resources can create gaps, but, and this is the fascinating part, they have a secret weapon. A huge advantage, actually. In a small company, you often have strong, direct supervision from the owner-manager, and that can be an incredibly powerful and effective control all on its own. So when you boil it all down, it's pretty simple. In a smaller business, you just can't have layers and layers of bureaucracy. Instead, control is built on something far more personal, the direct, hands-on involvement of the owner. Their deep knowledge of the business acts as its own safeguard. It's all about trust and oversight. Now let's be clear. Companies don't just do all of this out of the goodness of their hearts. There are some really powerful external forces at play here. We're talking about the actual laws and regulations that act as the guardrails for the entire market. And this is a global thing, not just happening in one country. Take Malaysia, for example. The stock exchange there requires directors to put a formal statement on internal control right in their annual report. Then you jump over to the US, where the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was born out of massive scandals like Enron, goes even further. It forces auditors to give a formal public opinion on how effective those controls actually are. And this quote right here from Section 404 of that act, it just says it all. Listen to the wording. Maintained in all material respects, effective internal control. This isn't a suggestion. It's not a nice to have. It is a legal standard that companies and their auditors are held to, and there are serious consequences for getting it wrong. So who oversees all of this at the very highest level of a company? Who's watching the watchers? That's the crucial job of the audit committee. This isn't just another department. This is a committee made up of members of the board of directors, and it's required for public companies. Their main job is to be the shareholders' watchdog, making absolutely sure that management is doing its job and that the financial reports are rock solid. So let's tie all of this together. Why does any of this matter to you? Because every single piece we've talked about, from that first auditor's letter to the audit committee, is a critical link in a chain of trust that basically holds our entire financial system together. And the key takeaway here is that good controls protect everybody. For shareholders, it's peace of mind that the people in charge are doing their jobs.
For the directors themselves, it gives them a clear framework for how to manage responsibly. The company itself protects its money and its reputation. And in the end, the entire market benefits because it builds integrity and gives investors the confidence to participate.
So, if we think of all these internal controls as the guardrails on a winding mountain road, keeping the business safe, it leaves you with a pretty big question, right? What happens when the people behind the wheel just decide to ignore them and hit the accelerator? That's a thought worth hanging on to.